Hey everyone, Mitch coming in for the Commander Scores Studio. Welcome to the show. So today's deck tech is on the Enchantress of all Enchantress commanders. That's right, Sythis Harvest Hand, a 1/2 legendary enchantment creature nymph that costs green, white, and says, when you cast an enchantment spell, you gain 1 life and draw a card. Very simple text on this one, but a lot of potential, a lot of possibilities, a lot of power, and you're going to be drawing an absurd amount of cards, and yes, gaining life, which in some ways can also draw you cards. We'll talk about some ways here in a bit, but yeah, this is a low-to-the-ground commander that is incredibly impactful. We can jam-pack this deck with enchantments and ensure that we are going to be drawing an absurd amount of cards to keep our hand full, and then take advantage of, well, playing those enchantments as well as having powerful enchantments in play. We're going to have other kinds of triggers, we're going to have other kinds of powerful effects, and things are going to get absolutely crazy. Enchantments, well, are considered to be one of the hardest permanent types to deal with, and yeah, that is what this entire deck is built around. Just all enchantments, essentially. So our opponents are going to have a difficult time, and we are going to just be, well, with a full grip basically the entire game, even more so than a full grip at certain points, because we can use and abuse certain cards that work incredibly well with this one. And of course, this Enchantress commander has other Enchantress friends that can help out too. So we've got a lot of avenues to victory, a lot of powerful plays that we can make. And as I say this, well, keep in mind that on this episode, on this deck tech, like my other deck techs, I'm going to be taking you through different tactics to show you how this deck works and how we are going to win with it. Also, every single card in this deck, except for the commander, which comes in just over $1. Every other card is less than $1, so it's a very budget-friendly deck. So yeah, keep that in mind. And if you are interested in this commander, in this deck, make sure you check out that deck list link in the description below. And now with all that said, let's jump into it. So with this deck, even our ramp package can actually draw us an absurd amount of cards thanks to our commander and other Enchantress effects. Wild Growth, a great turn 1 play. Enchanted on land, that land's gonna tap for additional mana. Fertile Ground, exact same thing essentially, but we can choose either of our colors. Wolf Willow Haven is also gonna tap for a green like Wild Growth, and if we really need to, sure, we can sacrifice it and make a wolf token. Next up, we've got some 3-mana enchantments that can enchant lands with Glittering Frost and Verdant Haven. These are going to have their enchanted land tap for additional color of whatever we want. And on top of that, Verdant Haven is going to have us gain 2 life. Moving on, some more 3-mana enchant lands. Find the Path has a land, tap for green, and we're going to venture into the dungeon when it comes into play. Sheltered Eyrie is also going to have it tap for 2 mana, but now of any one color. Gift of Paradise, exact same thing, but we also gain 3 life when it enters the battlefield. Moving on, we've got Grafted Growth, New Horizons, and Weirding Wood, all of which, again, let one of our lands tap for 2 mana of any one color. On top of that, Grafted Growth and New Horizons will get a counter on one of our creatures, and Weirding Wood is going to make us a clue that, of course, we can sacrifice to, guess what, draw even more. But now let's move on to some other enchantments that can help us tap for even more with our lands. Overgrowth. Yeah, that's a perfect name for this card because that enchanted land is going to tap for additional green, a 3-mana ramp spell that is going to have us produce 2 additional mana. Dawn's Reflection Market Festival for 1 mana more will help us produce mana of any combination of colors with the fantastic land that they are going to be attached to. And actually, I will bring up one specific land toward the end of the show that is a great target for each and every single one of these. But next up, let's talk about some other ways to ramp as well. With Jukai Naturalist, an incredible card in this deck. Low to the ground, 2/2 with lifelink, and it says enchantment spells you cast cost 1 less to cast. This can save us just an absurd amount of mana throughout the game. Next up, we've got Shigeki, which is a legendary enchantment creature. So yeah, sure, if we got Jukai Naturalist out, we can save on Shigeki, and we can save multiple times because Shigeki also has pay 1 and a green, tap, bounce it back to our hand, reveal the top 4 cards of our library. We can put a land card from among them on the battlefield tapped, the rest into our graveyard, and we can actually channel it away if we need to get some things back out of our graveyard. But yeah, Shigeki can help us ramp multiple times in a game. And again, being able to bounce back to our hand, being able to recast it, that's just extra card draw, extra life gain thanks to our commander. And then there's Starnheim Courser, which does say artifact and enchantment spells you cast cost 1 less to cast. So yeah, extra cost reduction, what's not to love, especially with cards, again, that can be bounced back. For example, Mana Bloom is an enchantment that costs X and a green, and it says enters the battlefield, X charge counters on it, remove a charge counter from it to add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool, activate only once each turn. In the beginning of your upkeep, if it has no charge counters on it, return it to its owner's hand. So literally, you can just use this, even if you don't want to put any charge counters on it, you don't have to. You can just pay a single green mana, put it into play, in the beginning of your next upkeep, you're going to be like, oh no, it has no charge counters on it. Bounce back to my hand. Do it again, rinse and repeat. So yeah, you can literally put no charge counters on this if you don't want to. This is just a great repeatable way to draw cards. Rancor, another way that can help us out as well, and also make a creature pretty deadly. +2/+0 and trample on enchanted creature. And then whenever it's put in the grave from the battlefield, it comes back to our hand. And again, it's just a 1 mana spell. Squirrel Sanctuary. Hey, when it comes into play, let's make a 1/1 squirrel. Cute. Awesome. Whenever a non-token creature we control dies, we can pay 1 to bounce this back to our hand, so we can make another squirrel. And again, every single time we are playing these, let's draw a card, let's gain a life, thanks to our commander. Now, as good as all these cards are, there is one, in my opinion, that stands above the rest, and that is the Golden Pig of this deck, which of course is the #1 card out of 99. And the Golden Pig for this deck is Whip Silk. It's a very simple aura that costs a single green mana. It says enchant creature has reach, and also just a little piece of text on there. Pay a single green mana, return Whip Silk back to its owner's hand. So this is a repeatable draw spell in this deck, essentially. A repeatable mass draw spell again, because essentially what we're going to be doing is paying a green, putting on a creature, paying a green, bouncing it back, doing the same thing over and over and over again. Basically, pay 2 mana, draw a card, gain a life, and again, if we have more Enchantress effects in play, and we definitely have more of them, and we definitely have other triggers we can take advantage of too, we're going to be getting an absurd amount of triggers from this, an absurd amount of card advantage, an absurd amount of other effects. Yeah, Whip Silk is an incredible card, a great repeatable way to get a crazy amount of value throughout the game. So yeah, it is definitely worthy of the title of Golden Pig. Next up though, other great cards in this deck include Conviction, Brilliant Halo, and Spirit Loop. Conviction can essentially be a Whip Silk if we have one of those cost reducers in play, and yeah, it's not much worse when we don't. 1 and a white, enchant creature gets +1/+3, pay a single white, bounce it back to our hand. So again, if we have that cost reduction, again, basically the exact same thing as Whip Silk. Brilliant Halo is kind of like a Rancor, +1/+2. When it's put in the graveyard from the battlefield, it comes back to our hand. Spirit Loop, somewhat similar. Whenever enchanted creature deals damage, we gain that much life. So we can actually put this on an opponent's creature if we want to be a little defensive with it. And whenever it's put in the graveyard from play, again, it comes back to our hand. So yeah, if creatures get taken out, that's okay. We get it back. Fortitude, somewhat similar way. Hey, when it's put in the graveyard from play, it comes back to our hand. We can also sacrifice a forest to regenerate enchanted creature. So this can be a fantastic way to protect a key creature, like our commander. Or we can actually protect ourselves with Gossamer Chains. We can bounce this back to our hand and then make it so that target unblocked creature deals no combat damage this turn. So it's going to just be a great attack deterrent, essentially be like, don't waste your attack on me, or if you do, hey, I'm actually just going to bounce it back to my hand and use it again. You can just bounce it back when you need to anyways. Even if you're protecting an opponent, you can make some deals. There's a lot of cool things that you can do with this one. Moving on, some very simple but incredibly effective cards in this deck are Abundant Growth, Unbridled Growth, and Frog Tongue. Each of these are just 1 mana, and they are essentially cantrips on their own, but again, in combination with our commander, they're going to draw us 2 cards for the price of 1 mana, which is crazy. And again, we have a lot of other enchantresses. We have a lot of other triggers that are going to be happening. Abundant Growth is great. Enter the battlefield, draw a card. Again, cantrip. It's going to make one of our lands tap for 1 mana of any color. So yeah, we can actually fix mana with this as well. Unbridled Growth, very similar. Doesn't draw us that card when it comes into play. Can let that land tap for 1 mana of any color. And also we can sacrifice it to draw that card. Frog Tongue, very strange card. Very interesting art. But yeah, when it enters the battlefield, we draw a card. And it makes it so that creature has reach. Again, the main thing that matters with these, though, is that these are incredibly efficient, incredibly effective draw spells, essentially, for us. Because, as I've mentioned many times, yeah, we've got enchantresses in this deck, like, Enchantress's Presence. Hey, whenever you cast an enchantment spell, draw a card. And actually, this is an enchantment itself, which is absolutely lovely. Next up, Satyr Enchanter. Cast an enchantment, draw a card. Next up, Mace Enchantress. Cast an enchantment, draw a card. Again, you can draw an absurd amount of cards once you get multiple enchantresses in play on top of our commander. Just absolutely crazy the amount of value that we can get. Speaking of value, the value train just keeps rolling on. Trellisar Moondancer. Whenever you're gaining life, you get a counter on this and you scry 1. So again, now you're taking advantage of the other end of that with your commander. Yes, drawing cards is incredible. Also, gaining life, nice usually, but when you can make the most of it with something like this, absolutely great. Again, make this into a huge threat, and also scry a ton to help set up your draws. Well of Lost Dreams, though, takes it a step further. Whenever you're gaining life, you can pay X, where X is less than or equal to the amount of life you gain. If you do, you draw X cards. So basically, hey, every single time you play an enchantment, gain a life with your commander, draw a card with your commander, you want to pay an extra 1, draw a card? Yeah, you do. So just keep digging down into your deck. And while you're digging, dig for the right things with abundance. It says if you draw a card, you may instead choose land or non-land, reveal cards until you hit that, essentially. Get that in your hand, rest of the bottom of your library in any order. So essentially at a certain point, you're like, I don't really need any more lands. I'm just going to keep drawing into, well, probably more enchantments. So more enchantments, thank you. More enchantments, thank you. More enchantments, thank you. So yeah, at a certain point, just keep saying non-land if you really want to. But yeah, also keep in mind that this can actually prevent you from milling out, essentially, because at a certain point, even if you're out of a certain kind of card, again, land or non-land, this basically it replaces your draw, so it prevents you from actually losing the game. If you're about to draw and you have no library, you don't lose, because you're replacing your draw with this. Next up, though, a way to draw an absurd amount of cards in a single turn, Rite of Harmony. Whenever a creature or enchantment is battlefield under control, draw a card, and you can flash it back. We're going to be talking about some ways to make a lot of creatures very quickly, so you can draw a crazy amount of cards with this, and again, twice with that flashback. Open the armory, a great tutor for this deck. Go get any aura or equipment, and get it right in your hand. Yeah, it's going to be an aura, and it's probably going to be Whip Silk, so have fun with that. Next up, though, let's talk about some ways to protect our key pieces. First up with Alcid of Life's Bounty. Pay 1, sacrifice it. Target creature enchantment we control is going to get protection for the color of our choice until the end of the turn. Again, a great way to protect many of our great things, including our commander. Speaking of which, Shepherd of the Flock. A very simple card. One that is a 3/1 if we really want it as a creature, or most likely we're going to be utilizing that adventure part first. Bounce target permanent we control back to its owner's hand. That is a great way to protect, well, essentially any of our key pieces. And again, if we're bouncing an enchantment back to our hand, we can then just recast it for even more value to draw and gain a life. Light the Way, very similar way. Choose one, we can get a counter on a creature or vehicle, untap it. Cool, that's nice. But also, bounce a permanent we control back to its owner's hand. A great way to protect a key piece, and again, a great way to utilize an enchantment, again, to draw even more cards. Speaking of enchantments that can help protect and help draw, Broken Fall, here we go. Bounce it back to our hand, regenerate target creature. Molding Skin does the exact same thing. Put these on a key creature, like our commander, to protect them. And also, again, we can utilize these multiple times throughout the game to draw more cards to get more triggers. Solitary Confinement. This is an incredible card in a deck like this. It says at the beginning of your upkeep, sacrifice it unless you discard a card. Again, our hand is going to be chock full of cards. Skip your draw step. We don't care. Does not matter. We're going to be drawing a crazy amount of cards every single turn. Again, thanks to our commander and other enchantresses. And what do we get for this sacrifice that we are making? We have Shroud, so our opponents can't target us. I mean, we can't target ourselves either, but big deal. Anyways, and they also prevent all damage to be dealt to you. Absolutely crazy. Like a giant force field around us. You got to get rid of this before you can touch us opponents, and this is just a massive way to protect ourselves in a lot of key situations. But now let's talk about some ways to throw a wrench into our opponent's plan, starting with Seal of Cleansing and Seal Primordium, each of which basically do the exact same thing. Sacrifice them to destroy target artifact or enchantment. Next up, Ossification. Enchant a basic land you control. Yeah, we're going to have plenty of those. When it enters the battlefield, exile target creature or planeswalker opponent controls until this leaves the battlefield. If it never leaves the battlefield, sorry, your creature's just gone. Chains of Custody. In a somewhat similar way, we enchant a creature we control. When it enters the battlefield, we exile target non-land permanent opponent controls until this leaves the battlefield. And on top of that, there's some great protection from our key piece that we're enchanting, because that also has Ward 2. Banishing Light and Oblivion Ring, Very similar. I mean, there are certain combo things you can do. This is not that kind of a deck, though. Basically do the exact same thing, though. ETB, get rid of a target non-land permanent that an opponent controls for Banishing Light, Oblivion Ring, any, and then when it leaves the battlefield, that comes back. Touch the Spirit Realm, somewhat similar. When it enters the battlefield, exile an artifact or creature until it leaves the battlefield, or we can actually channel it if it's in our hand, discard it, and then blink something, so we can actually save one of our own things if we need to. Cast out, flash, entering the battlefield, getting rid of non-land permanent opponent controls until it leaves, or we can cycle it away, and then a great saga with Elspeth Conquers Death. The first lower counter, exile a big permanent that costs 3 or greater. Second one, non-creature spells your opponent's cast cost 2 more to cast till your next turn. Third one, return a creature planeswalker back from your graveyard to the battlefield, get a counter on it. Have fun with that. And speaking of fun, yeah, let's have some great board wipes in this deck. Winds of Wrath, destroy all creatures that are enchanted that can't be regenerated. Austere Command, very flexible. Choose 2. Destroy all artifacts, enchantments, big creatures, small creatures, whatever we need for the situation that we are in. And then Dusk, yeah, this can definitely be a one-sided board wipe as well. Destroy all creatures with power 3 or greater. Dawn, other side, hey, get those small creatures back from your graveyard back to your hand. Now when it comes to winning with this commander, though, some fantastic ways to do so with cards like Historian's Boon, Johnny's Chosen, and Archon of Sun's Grace. Historian's Boon's going to make us a 1/1 white soldier creature token every single time we have a non-token enchantment enter the battlefield under our control. Johnny's Chosen is going to let us make a 2/2 cat creature token every single time we do so as well. And then Archon of Sun's Grace has Constellation. Whenever enchantment enters the battlefield under control, you get a 2/2 Pegasus creature token with flying. And on top of that, yeah, our Pegasus creatures, which this makes, have lifelink, so have fun with that. Then we've got a really big heavy hitter with Catilda, Dawnheart Martyr, Star, flying lifelink, pro vampires, power and toughness each equal to the number of permanents you control that are spirits and or, of course, enchantments. So yeah, this can hit really hard. And we can also disturb this out of our graveyard, and it's going to be an aura enchant creature, basically pumping a creature based off of our enchantments and giving it flying and lifelink, and sure, pro vampires. So if you're going up against your friends, Edgar Markov deck, oh, good luck to them. Next up, Kami of Transience. This one can be really hard to deal with and can be a heavy hitter. 2/2 trample. Whenever we cast an enchantment spell, we get a counter on it. Yeah, it's going to happen quite often. On top of that, at the beginning of each end step, if an enchantment is put in a graveyard from the battlefield this turn, we can get it back from our graveyard back to our hand. Celestial Ancient, a way to make our creatures absolutely massive. Whenever you cast an enchantment spell, you get a counter on each creature you control. Yeah, it's gonna happen quite often, and yeah, good luck, opponents, once we get going. Droid Elman, Wily Recluse. This can be a great card for this deck for 2 reasons. First up, whenever you draw your second card each turn, create a 2/2 cat creature token. That's gonna happen quite often. But perhaps more importantly, pay for green until end of turn creatures you control base power toughness XX for X number of cards in your hand. Again, they're going to be few and far between times that we don't have a full grip. And there are going to be times when we have even more than that just by drawing some cards in our turn. When we activate this, we can make our creatures absolutely monstrous and wipe out our opponents in absolutely no time. Speaking of which, Psychosis Crawler, we can just do all this just by drawing cards. We can wipe out our opponents. Power Toss each equal the number of cards in our hand. So again, this can be massive. More importantly though, whenever you draw a card, each opponent loses 1 life. With the amount of cards that we can draw up this stack, our opponents don't stand a chance, and they really don't stand a chance if we can time Rampage of the Clans at just the right time we need it. Rampage of the Clans says destroy all artifacts and enchantments for each permanent destroyed this way. Its controller creates a 3/3 green centaur creature token. This is a high risk, high reward play that can come out of absolutely nowhere. Right before our turn, we can cast this, replace every single one of our enchantments with a 3/3. This can be a game ending play for opponents aren't expecting it. But now that we've talked about every single non-land card in this deck, let's move on to the lands. And first up, I alluded to this land earlier with Thornglint Bridge. This is a fantastic target for our enchant land auras because it enters the battlefield tapped, and it does tap for either our colors, but most importantly, it is indestructible. So it's really hard for opponents to actually deal with, and because of that, again, it's a great target for us to put our ramp onto. Moving on, we've got Command Tower, which can tap for either of our colors. Exotic Orchard, which can do so most of the time. And Ash Barrens, which has basic land cycling for 1. Next up, we've got Evolving Wilds, Summer Expanse, both of which are the exact same thing. Tap, sacrifice them, go get a basic into play Tapped in a somewhat similar way, we've got the new Capenna lands, Broker's Hideout and Cabaret Courtyard. When they come into play, we sacrifice them, immediately go get a Forest or Plains, put a play tapped, gain 1 life. Then we've got some lands that can actually up ramp us as well. Crozen Verge, Mirror Landscape, and Blighted Woodland. They are fantastic in this and many decks. Then we've got some lands like Canopy Vista, Fortified Village, and Selesnya Sanctuary. The first 2 can enter the battlefield untapped to meet the requirement, and Selesnya Sanctuary is a great bounce land. And next up, we got Sungrass Barriers, can filter our mana, Temple of Plenty, which is a Scryland, and Blossoming Sands, which gains us 1 life when it comes into play. And finally, we're going to be rounding this deck out with Forest, of course, and Plains. But now that I've talked about every single card in this deck, let's talk about the price. And like I mentioned at the beginning of this episode, every single card in the deck outside of the commander, which is just over $1, every other card is less than $1. So it's an incredibly budget-friendly deck with an estimated cost of just $28.47. And keep in mind, if you already got the basics for this deck, well, those basic lands are being included at 10 cents a piece, so there's some extra savings for you there. Speaking of potential extra savings, you might be able to save even more by buying this deck on TCG Player and utilizing heavily played and damaged cards, which of course need a home too. That being said, this estimated cost does not include the cost of shipping, which might vary depending upon where you live. And with that, today's episode is coming to a close, so yeah, let me know what your thoughts are on it in the comments below. And of course, as always, thanks again and have a good one. This show and episodes like this one are possible thanks to viewers like you. If you're looking for an easy way to help support this show, make sure that you like, share, and subscribe. Also, hit that bell notification icon so you don't miss any new episodes. You can also go check out our playmats and other merchandise at thecommandersquarters.com. We also have a ton of brand new t-shirt designs in stock, so make sure you check out those as well. Another easy way to support this show is with our TCG Player affiliate links. So whether you're buying a deck or individual cards, you can use this general link right here or one in the description. And the final way that you can support this show is by supporting us directly by becoming a patron. There are many benefits to being a patron, and I truly couldn't do this without all of their support.